What are the signs? What are signs a sign loves you or is developing an emotional connection with you? A guy loves you. Oh, gee, Lily, that's so variable, right? Somebody wants to spend time with you. They engage with you on a regular basis. They flirt with you. They treat you well. Um, Love is, I mean, the L word is a big deal. So I don't know that everybody who is 23, 24, 25 really understands love. We think we do, right? Butterflies, somebody has butterflies when you think about them. Caitlin. Oh, good, nurse. Yes, go grab a cup of tea and come on back. Amy, I'm glad to know you had a good visit with your friend. And you know, Caitlin, your therapist isn't going anywhere. You know, don't forget, I tell my clients all the time, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be right here. When you need to talk, even if it's one session, you can come back in. There's no reason that this idea that we have to terminate our relationship with a therapist is, I think, a misnomer. At least I don't know a therapist that works that way. Maybe some do. And to be honest, the only reason that I can think of that anybody even would is because if you officially terminate the relationship, then when a client comes back, you can charge them whatever your current rate is. But your consent agreement says, like, let's say I had a client come in 5 years ago, and my rate with them was X amount of dollars, but since then, my rate's gone up 20%. Well, as long as they've been seeing somebody, welcome back, nurse. As long as they've been seeing somebody or seeing me for regularly, I can't charge them a higher rate because it's kind of like a contract when you come in. So I just want you to understand that's the only reason, really, that a therapist might officially terminate. There are some maybe protocols about saying, you know, our time together is our goals have been completed, so our time together has come to an end, and you don't need to come back. But you don't need to worry about having this hardcore end relationship. The only thing that's going to be different is that you won't have an appointment on the books. But I'll bet if you call that therapist, they'll get you in, right? Nurse, I think that's a great idea. If you have any need for an outside and objective perspective on how to manage the relationship, by all means. And yes, Miss Caitlin, of course. It doesn't have to be scary. But nurse, if you have any desire to get some perspective on anything, go see a therapist. I will tell you this. Therapy is a little bit like dating. If you've never seen a therapist, then what you need to know is we're different. I mean, people, you know, just like people are different, there's lots of different kinds of therapists. And it's really, really important to find a therapist that you connect with. So, you know, I think if you put some thought into what are the qualities of your best friend? Are they personable? Do they talk a lot? Do they talk about you? Do they ask about you a lot? Um, yeah, you're worried that your friends are biased. Exactly. Um, oh, Beth Ann, don't you go anywhere. I want to talk about that statement if that's okay with you. Um, and my suggestion is, and I know this sounds kind of silly, but my suggestion is to get on Psychology Today, put in your zip code. You can You can sort if you want, like if you only want to talk to a woman or if you want to talk to a man. Um, if you just want to do virtual sessions or if you want to do in-person sessions, you can kind of sort them that way. And then literally scroll and look first. And I know this sounds superficial, but I swear to you, this is kind of in my opinion, a fail-safe way. Look for a face that you would want to talk to. There's a fair amount of research about how people connect just to faces. So look first for a face. Maybe it's a smile. Maybe it's a haircut that reminds you of somebody. It's psychologytoday.com. Look for maybe somebody who has a haircut that reminds you of your favorite aunt. And then when you see somebody, you're like, oh, they look nice. Then you look over and you read their little blurb. Everybody who's on that website writes a little blurb about their expertise or what they love, their passion or their modality. And if you like how they sound, or, if you like what they've written, so it's a little bit like a dating profile, right? It's kind of like Tinder for psychologists. Yeah, like somebody taking care of you. I did say psychologytoday.com. And hello, Joni. It's a little, yeah, I've never used that phrase before, but that's exactly what it is. It's like Tinder for therapists. And then you can kind of look and see how long have they been licensed, if that's important to you. Some people don't want a therapist right out of grad school. Some people do want a therapist right out of grad school. Some people want somebody who has a specialty in working with depression or anxiety. Other people are like, nah, that's not really important to me because I have like relationship with teenagers. But maybe if they say, hey, I specialize in teenagers, maybe that's a good person to go to. Or do you want somebody who's also a mother so that there's some kind of relational element? You can read all about them. And then you have to you can almost always send an email from that little blurb and then ask them if they're taking new clients. All right, so I want to go back to this comment from Beth Ann. You have a hard time telling your therapist your true feelings because you feel weak if you tell them your true feelings. I want to say to you that, and I'm going to tell a story because that's kind of what I do. And for all of those of you who are here week after week, you've heard this story. But I was in grad school. Well, actually, I was finishing my undergrad. I had to go back to school in my 40s, finish my undergrad, and before I could go to grad school, because once I made the decision to become a therapist. And I was going through this horrible divorce. There was all this ridiculous drama, toil, and trouble in my life. And I was driving into town to go to class one morning, and I had no, I wasn't going to class. I was meeting with one of my psychology professors because I was going to do some research with her. And I have to set the stage. She is this little thing. And so this was 17 years ago. God, that sounds like a long time. And when I say she's a little thing, she's very petite. She was probably 27, tops, 26, 27. She might have been 28 or 29, but she didn't look it. And she was probably literally only 2 years out of her PhD. But sweet, very sweet. And I had chosen to do research with her. So anyway, I'm driving onto campus, and my ex, or we were still married at the time, we had this horrible fight as I was driving in. And I couldn't just sit in the parking lot and cry. So I went to the bathroom, I threw cold water on my face, tried to put cold compresses on my eyes. And I go in and I sit down in her office, and she said hi, and I said hi, and she goes, "What's the matter?" And I just lost it. I could not hold it together. So she got up and she shut the door of her office. And she said, "Oh my gosh, Leslyn, what's the matter?" And she kind of gets real therapist-y close to me, And keep in mind, I wasn't a therapist at this point. And I'm crying, and I said, "God damn it, I'm so sorry. I hate it when I'm this weak." And this young thing sits real close to me, and she goes, "Ugh, don't you realize how much strength it takes to show your feelings? This is strength." And I have never forgotten that. I have told that story. If I've told it once, I have told it 2,000 times. And thank you, baking. And I tell it because we are conditioned and socialized to believe that expressing our emotions is weakness. We're somehow conditioned to believe that sucking it up is strength. But that is not true. What takes incredible strength is the ability to be vulnerable, because we're conditioned against it. It takes all this amazing strength to move outside of the social norms and express yourself and talk about how you feel. And what's really hard is if you don't have any idea how you feel because your feelings have been shut down most of your life, it's incredibly hard even to face that and to share. And all of us therapists know that. And so I guarantee you that when you express emotion in that therapy session, your therapist is going to see that as strength. Just so you know. Hold on. I want to catch up here. Was often shut down, told to lighten up, get over it. That, I really do get on a soapbox about this, because we are born understanding emotion, or at least expression. We freely, watch any 2-year-old. We freely have the capacity to exert frustration, to say no, to cry when our feelings are hurt, to cry when we're disappointed, to giggle when we're happy, to tease and flirt. We have all of this capacity naturally. And there's proof by watching any 2-year-old. And then, because it's hard to be so full of raw, untamed emotion, we're shut down. And because, I could really go feminist on this and say that the expression of emotion and the shutdown of emotion was a misogynistic tool for control. I mean, literally, as early as 100 years ago, hysteria was pathologized, right? PMS was pathologized. Women's emotion, crying, was pathologized. If your child was taken away from you or died of some disease and you just couldn't recover from that, it was pathologized, right? Or if you had maybe a hyper grieving response, it was pathologized. And so it's no damn wonder. I mean, it's no wonder it's no wonder. Men, not all men, but men feel helpless when a woman is crying because they identify their masculinity by their ability to fix what's wrong. And if you're a woman, you know that not all the things we cry about are fixable, especially if we can't articulate what we feel is wrong. And so a man who is insecure is not going to be comfortable watching you cry, let alone listening to you cry. And so we are told to shut up or suck it up, or well, if there's nothing wrong, or we're told our emotions are marginalized. And it's not just men. I don't want to, this isn't a man bashing thing, but I want you to just look at the reality of the history, right? And because of that, and God, to be honest, for men it's worse. The truth is, we at least had the hysteria, right? We could kind of fall into that. But if a man ended up having a grief reaction because his kid died from a disease, his emotional response was treated even more pathologically. He wasn't a man, and that's probably more tragic. I don't know if more is really, it's not quantifiable in that way, but this idea that emotions are a sign of weakness is total, utter bullshit for men and women. And I honestly believe that until we socially correct that, we're going to continue to have so many of the problems that we have in our culture. And I'm not saying that we all should be able to have a meltdown in the middle of the damn grocery store. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we need to be taught what to do with our emotions. First of all, we have to be able to label them. And then we need to be able to be taught how to process them effectively. What do I do? Especially men, what do I do with this feeling of helplessness? The men that I counsel are so uncomfortable with feeling helpless, they will drink, they will leave, they will shut down, they will walk out. And what does a woman interpret when a man walks out, shuts down, or leaves when she's emotional? A woman hears, he doesn't care about my feelings. When what may actually be going on is, I feel so helpless and I don't know how to manage this helplessness, so I have to exit, or I have to shut down. I have to pretend like it's not happening. So I really could talk about this for so long. Let me catch up on questions. And hello to everybody who popped in. I know when I go on these rampages, it's not black and white. But it is a huge problem in our culture that we have got to fix, because it's the source of anger. It's the source of disease. It's the source of, I would tell you, it's the source of so much ugliness. So, Caitlin, I'm still seeing that your therapist got up and clapped when you fell apart in therapy. I don't know that I've ever clapped, but I did tell a man earlier this week, he just broke into sobs, and I said, yes, this has to happen. This emotion has to happen. Men having to really scare you. Nick, why? Men having intense emotions, that's a sign of, wow, that's a sign of maturity, a sign of strength, as long as it's an emotion that's being expressed constructively. I know somebody who works in a corporate environment, and we were having dinner not too long ago, and she said, I think it's ridiculous that I have to spend so much of my day talking about people's emotions Now, this woman is very successful. She was raised in a very rigid, what I perceive to be a rigid family. And she's not one to express many emotions at all. And so, what's interesting to me is that I think that in professional spaces, the HR departments are starting to get a better understanding of the need to create a safe space for people. Christ, you spend most of your waking hours at work, and if you go out and you work, and life happens, and for crying out loud, for 2 years our lives have been turned upside down and stressed. People are going to have emotions, and so if we're not talking about them at work, where are we talking about them if you spend most of your time there? Let's see. How about a man who loves you? What will he do when a woman cries? It doesn't matter if he loves you or not. A man who's uncomfortable with helplessness is often going to respond in a way that I don't think it's that typical, right? I think what happens is when a man, and this is really anybody, it could be a mother, I don't want to genderize it specifically, but I think overwhelmingly when somebody feels helpless, there is a rush to dismiss that feeling. It's one of the feelings that we rush to dismiss, even subconsciously. And I want to challenge, if you're listening and you're going, this is interesting, I want to really challenge you to pay attention to the next time that you feel helpless. What do? What's your natural inclination? Do you run away? Do you try to fix it? Are you sitting there like, I don't know what to do? Do you express that you feel helpless? Do you sit with that and identify it in yourself? It's such an interesting emotion because we don't feel in control, right? When we're helpless, we don't have any control. And we don't like not being in control. And I don't mean in control of other people, I mean in control of us. So it's really pretty interesting. I pick up on that in almost every couples session that I do. We talk about helplessness, and the couples that I work with for any length of time learn to talk about and identify helplessness because it's a really big driver of behavior. Pathology means, or pathological means sick. So when I say that hysteria was pathologized, what I mean was we believed that women who were hysterical were sick. And that's what I mean. But we know that that's not true. It's not sick. You're not sick if you cry. You're not sick if you have a grief reaction, right? You're not sick if you have a stress, and I say sick in the medical way. Okay, hold on. Let me have a sip of wine. Because this is another rant. To pathologize emotion means to say, if you're depressed, you're sick. And depression can be an illness. But if my partner dies, I am going to feel sad. And that sadness is not a sickness. That sadness is grief, and grief is normal. If I lose my job and I am depressed, that is not an illness. That is a natural, normal reaction to a major life stressor. we are pathologizing, and I appreciate that we are highlighting mental health. That needs to be done. But I don't want that pendulum to swing so far that we aren't normalizing normal responses to stressful and life events, right? Now, technically, a practitioner knows that a grief reaction is not pathological. It's not an illness until it's been a certain amount of time. We know that, I think professionals know that illnesses or sadness or anxiety is a normal and natural reaction. But I think our culture has been in this kind of effort to make people aware or to raise awareness of mental illness in our culture. I think some interpretations of that have been overstated. And now I have clients that come to me and they say, I am so depressed. Okay, well, let's find out what's going on. Oh, you were sick for 2 months with COVID? Oh, you lost an uncle? Oh, you haven't been working. You have 2 kids. They've been home the whole time. Oh, and your husband left? I'd be frickin' sad too. I would be frickin' mad. I'm going to normalize the shit out of that sadness and out of that anger. Now, if that sadness and anger extends across a long period of time and it prevents this individual from living a normal functioning life, if it prevents them from looking for a job or taking care of themselves or taking care of the children, now we have a different story. But the mere presence of that emotion is normal and necessary. I'm going to say necessary, because if we don't experience it, where's all that energy going? Yeah, teacher and engineer didn't want it. Yeah, and engineers are the worst, with all due respect. The engineer brain is, what's the word I want? Pragmatic, right? The engineer brain is logic above all else. The engineer brain thinks in like pictures and mechanics, generally speaking. And so emotions aren't rational. There's no pragmatism too often for emotions. And so it's really hard to process the non-rational pieces for a lot of people. And we're talking predominantly neurotypical people. The people who are not neurotypical, that's a whole nother story, right? People with ADHD sometimes, people with anybody on the spectrum. We're talking about a whole different array of emotion processing. And we don't even know what some of those differences are. People with super high intelligence. There are so many different caveats to this that's why I said it's not black and white, but there are some basic elements. And I think a lot of it could be circumvented if we would simply teach our children what emotions are, teach them to label them, teach them to recognize them, teach them to label them, and teach them to express their emotions in a really healthy way. It would just make all the difference in the world. I got a little teary today. I was telling this client, we were talking about acceptance. I could have a whole TikTok, maybe Monday night, Matter of fact, that's a really good idea. Maybe Monday night we'll talk about radical acceptance. It's a big part of what I'm going to talk about and teach in the retreat. And it's a huge part of opening yourself up to personal growth, right? So radical acceptance. And I was trying to talk with this couple about accepting one another and just kind of teaching people in general that when we're in a relationship, there are going to be things about our partners that just piss us off, that are just seemingly intolerable. But many, many, many of those things are just nuances of who they are. And they're, to be honest, and I think if you sit back and think about it, they're probably things that you thought were a little cute or eccentric when you first met. And now they just are annoying AF, right? So Harlan I think I talked about this before, but for those of you who are new to me, Harlan was my partner. We spent 10 years together and he passed away in 2017. And I talk about him a lot because he was just such a gift to me and he taught me so much. He's still very much alive in the spirit of my life. And so I was in grad school and he would get up in the morning and we would go into my office, and I kind of had two workstations in my office, my home office. And I would be working on some paper. And Harlan would sit down and he'd drink his coffee and he'd check the football game and he would read about some coach that got fired or in trouble or fined or something. He'd go through Facebook and he'd touch base with all his old high school buddies. And then he would tell me a story. And he'd probably tell me a story, my friend John Smith. Now, we went to DeLoire High School. I think we might have played basketball in the 9th grade. And then I'm pretty sure he transferred over to Oscar Wilde. And I'm thinking to myself, why the hell do I want to know any of this stuff? But then, because he couldn't just send, I have a friend I went to high school with. Anyway, I digress. So then he would say, so Les, there's evidence for Bigfoot. And I'd say, what? And he'd say, yep, they got it on tape. It's going to be released. The video's going to be released next week. It says it right here on this blog. The blog, Finding Bigfoot. And I'd say, Harlan, let me see. So he goes, well, they haven't released it yet. It's going to be released next week. Can I tell you that this was at least 3 or 4 days every week? And, and of course they didn't release the video next week. Next week they'd say that it was getting checked by yet another expert. And then he would say, then he would come back and he'd say, Les, they're going to release it next week. And so, long story short, he drove me batshit crazy with the Bigfoot stuff. He really did. But it didn't hurt me. It didn't hurt him. And it just became one of those things about him that I just accepted. I didn't like it necessarily. It was a little embarrassing from time to time. And it was super annoying because, can I even tell you how many times we would be driving through the mountains or the hills or the woods someplace? And I lived out in the country, rolling hills. And he'd say, did you see that? And I'd say, see what? He goes, turn around. Or he would just go up to the next driveway and turn around. He'd pull over the side of the road. Sometimes he would get out of the car, but he kept a pair of binoculars in the back seat. And he would get the binoculars and he'd go, I saw something. So for Christmas one year, my daughter got him a hat and said, gone squatching. And I'm pretty sure he had a t-shirt that said something like that too. It was just part of who he was. And so I share that see, I told you I'd go off on a tangent. I share that because, oh, grief. See? I was telling that story today. And as I was telling it, I thought to myself, I would drive with him and listen to Bigfoot 100 times over, 100 times a month, if it meant that I could have him back. That was nothing. And all those little things that have nothing to do with the value of the person that they are. I know that we say this, we watch movies, we read blogs, we hear stories about people who lose loved ones and say this, but it's true. Like that thing, and I knew that because I had also lost my first husband. And so there was a point when I would just look at him and I would say, I hope to God that you get to see that video. You know, Harlan, let's go squatching, I would say. You know, I did get to the point where it was like I just embraced that because it was so important to him. And I didn't care. But it was his thing. And I don't know. Anyway, I got very teary with a client today. And Rock Mama, I think I was just kind of, in my own way, just really validating that sometimes grief is super hard. And the tears that formed in my eyes when I talked to my client today, I did not hide them. I was not ashamed of them. It's just a part of the human experience that I had this feeling just come up while I was talking. And it was love, right? I think that was the feeling. It was, I'm not even sure it was grief. It was just love. Rock Mama, I am hosting and facilitating a retreat. I'm super, super excited about it. So I'll just share, if you guys have popped in, people ask me all the time, I wish you could be my therapist. And I can't be everybody's therapist, but my passion is really facilitating self-awareness and helping people discover their truest self. So I am finally, now that COVID has kind of settled down and we can get out again, I'm finally put together a self-awareness retreat. I'm very, very excited. I don't know exactly when or where. It's probably going to be in the DC area. I did make a post about it today. But there is a form on my website that literally, if you go to my link tree, it'll say, "This is me weekend retreat." You just click on that. You fill out the form at the bottom of the page and you let me know what your interests are. And there's some like check boxes of what it is that you would be interested in. And it's going to be limited to 10 people. It's going to be 2.5 full days of just self-discovery, mindfulness, talking about why we are the way we are, how did we become the way we are, and what the hell do we do with all of those things. So I'm hosting it in a state where I'm licensed. So if there's healing that needs to be done, we can work on those things, and then I can send you home with a referral for a therapist, or maybe connect you while we're there to a therapist. But I'm so excited because it truly is my passion. If you have any questions, feel free to either leave them on that post that I made, or the retreat's going to probably be in Annapolis, Joni, and I am licensed in Maryland. So yes, I say Annapolis, the DC greater area. Baking, you can fly in. It's, I haven't decided on the price. Again, if you have any interest, and I don't care where you live, if you have an interest in something like that, go fill out the form. There is a box to say hold it here. If I have 10 people say, come to California, I won't be licensed in California, so there I'll have to limit some of the healing pieces, but I can do everything else. I can still teach you about yourself and do the exercises and guide you and facilitate the discovery of who you are. My life changed when I was able to see my whole self. My life changed. And I hope to be able to do that for people for whatever, career I have left. So fill out the form, seriously, if you have any interest at all. I think that it will help me kind of decide where and when I'm going to go and do these things. I am in Pennsylvania in the waves, in terms of being licensed, yes. Um, and my office is in Pennsylvania, Southern Chester County. You were asked if there are any day after Super Bowl support groups. Baking, thank you so much. I always appreciate your support. I don't know. I think I certainly could have a support group, but I don't know. I don't know, and I don't think I even care enough about football. I mean, I think I'd probably get really sassy and say inappropriate things, because I think that allowing yourself to become that attached and that invested in a game is a sign of something else. Get out of the house and go shopping. It's true. To be honest though, and if I don't know if there's any men listening, or if women, you might pass this information along. I think I would really encourage anybody that's that disappointed from a game to do some deep introspection about what they're attaching to. You're traveling to Tennessee. Good for you. I really think that, I understand disappointment, right? I understand supporting your team. I understand disappointment. But there's something about that attachment that I think is unhealthy. Maybe I'll give some thought to that, but there's probably a psychologist someplace that has done some research on that, and I just don't know. Obsession theory. Hi, Court. So certainly OCD, right? The obsessive compulsive part. It is all about the attachment for sure. Maybe it's akin to like addiction slash, I'm going to say it's attachment, but it could be an addiction to the attachment, maybe. For many people, it's probably wrapped up into identity. If they played college ball, Harlan was a huge football player. He played football for the University of Delaware for a semester, and then he got redshirted, whatever that means. And then he played baseball for a different school, which I think is why he got redshirted. You're thinking, is that a light bulb? Oh, Lauren. And he certainly would be disappointed, but not so disappointed that he felt like he had to go drown his sorrows or that he couldn't get up and go to work the next day. He wasn't so disappointed. And again, that's kind of healthy versus unhealthy attachment. So there definitely is something there for those really extreme elements. It's a game. It's a game. It's a game. That's all it is. It's a game. And you're not even the one playing.